Welcome to Built to Finish. I'm your host, Stephen Pivnik. Join me each week as we explore the journeys of audacious goal setters. This includes experienced founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs sharing pivotal moments that propel their success. We'll also be talking with endurance athletes who push the limits of physical and mental ability. This show is brought to you by Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services to help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Built to Finish podcast. Today's guest is a seasoned business leader with over 25 years of global experience helping organizations solve some of their most persistent and high-impact challenges. His passion lies in unlocking the full potential of teams, ensuring they not only deliver meaningful value to their customers, both internal and external, but also drive measurable results for the business and its stakeholders. He works directly with CEOs and functional leaders to tackle one of the toughest problems in business, keeping execution truly aligned with strategic goals. Through a framework known as the Work-to-Value Management System, he empowers organizations to detect and correct execution drift, align work-to-value outcomes, and accelerate their time to achieving strategic goals. He is the CEO of Insights 7. Mike Hogan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stephen. It's quite the intro.
Yeah, you've done a lot.
I should have been taking notes. I was like, it's up from there.
You've accomplished a lot, and I'm sure everybody is looking forward to hearing a lot of your insights. So you're in a really interesting position. Not only have you done a lot of advisory work to help CEOs in their teams, but now you've also built a software as a service platform to help advisors, such as yourself, such as me, help their customers. So that was a really interesting pivot.
Yeah, I think really what it came down to is I started in 2008, started my company in 2008 as a professional services and managed services, and ended up was just experiencing so many great learnings. And I, instead of kind of losing that as and hiring consultants and they come and go, I decided to invest in institutionalizing all that learning into a software at that point, a platform as a service. And then, all that experience and growth and learning from, these brilliant customers that I've worked with, because I'd love to take the credit for all of it, but usually it's just me sort of facilitating and learning from great leaders. Here we are. It was 2016, and a lot of our customers were saying, hey, can we, this makes a ton of sense to us. We feel comfortable managing ourselves. Can we, license your software, which is kind of before, platform as a service became sort of a norm.
Right.
When your customers keep asking you for something, I think it's usually a good idea to listen. And so eventually I decided to pivot from a services-based company to a product-based company, right? So software as a service. And it was really about impact. I loved driving the transformation because of the impact it has on the organization and the value it creates, but also on the people itself. And so, the idea of being able to have a greater impact than just who we can work with directly really appealed to me. And so that's where it was like, hey, how can we leverage the software and equip, like you said, great partners in the market like yourself to go out and, it gives you the flexibility to tailor it to your style and your brand, but it really helps position your customers to be able to operate at such a higher level of performance, but also enjoyment. And I kind of feel like we spend a high percentage of our lives working. It should be as fun as possible and satisfying as possible. A lot of that just comes from, fulfillment of creating value. When you're doing that, it's easier to get out of bed in the morning.
I couldn't agree more. So I have a bunch of questions for you about the actual software, but let's talk about the projects that you've been working on over the years that actually facilitated the need for such a solution. So when you're doing your advisory type work, what are some of the common challenges that you've seen across all executive teams on your projects?
Yeah, I would say typically where I would get brought in are some of the, the more hot spots in terms of pain in an organization. And to answer your question, I think the challenge that I see after doing this over and over again is the mentality is do an assessment, make recommendations to close the gap from whatever the assessment found. And the assessment, though, I'd always, as I sort of watch my consultant peers come in, my first question was, what are you assessing against? And it's usually things like best practice, or, this is the way I've seen it done in a lot of other organizations that are really great, or this is the way we've always done it. And I looked at it, and oftentimes as a consultant, when you're coming in and doing that, it can be contentious because the ops side, who, understandably are kind of like, what are you bringing in outside experts for? And it kind of, there's this sort of feeling marginalized. At the end of the day, if you're going to assess any part of the organization, whether it's the leadership, side, it's the go-to-market side, it's the customer care side, whether it's, on the business support side, it doesn't matter. Everybody has a customer. And so what I would say is, hey, before we even talk about assessment recommendation, who's your customer? Because we need to know what the job to be done is that you are fulfilling for that customer and what their expectations are around service levels, right? So in terms of quality and cost, because without that, how do you know that what you're assessing against versus what I'm assessing against is legit? And that's where usually kind of the conflict happened. But when you have got agreement and shared understanding on who the customer is, what the job to be done is, and the quality and cost parameters around that, now you have something concrete to assess against. Then I would start the assessment. And again, really all I'm doing is facilitating the team so that they begin to recognize that, how we're delivering, right? The service delivery design, how they're resourcing it. When you measure the ability to deliver that target value, the gaps just pop. And so then you start to say, okay, now that we've identified those, let's not jump into solutioning. We got to first prioritize which of those gaps are going to have the greatest impact on what we call value throughput for your customers and stakeholders. And so at that point, then you're prioritizing, if we solve this problem first, second, third, kind of stack ranking them, what's going to have the greatest impact on value for your customers and stakeholders. Then you take that and drive that into ideation. And so all we're doing is making sure at the end of the day, what Insight 7 does is it is accelerating time to maximum value as measured by return on invested capital. Capital is not just money, but it's your labor resources, it's your time, it's your technology, all those things that financials enable. So, but at the end of the day, how do you know if what you're doing is driving value if you're not defining value explicitly and making sure that everybody is aligned to that?
Okay, so define value up front and then make sure everybody's rowing in the same direction to go and achieve that value.
Exactly. In fact, as we work with the CEOs, probably the one thing that, really talented CEOs. So we're not coming in saying, hey, we're going to tell you guys how to do your job, right? They don't necessarily need that help. What we're doing is, in all these conversations, they all say, I know what to do and I know how to do it. The number one problem is what you just said, Stephen. It's rowing in the right direction. How do I make sure everybody is aligned and rowing in the right direction? And translating that into operational speak, I call that ensuring that execution is aligned with the goals and principles as defined in the strategy. That alignment is incredibly difficult. It's the most difficult thing to manage in any business.
It sounds simple, right? Like, why wouldn't people do that? But I agree with you. It is challenging.
Yeah, well, it's tough because it's so complex, right? There's so many moving parts. But I think this comes down to, going to get back to your question, the biggest challenge that we see, that we address is we believe every company is a single value creation system. And its purpose is to create value for customers in a way that's also creating target value for stakeholders. And that is, if that's a system, then systems don't just appear out of thin air. They are usually emerge from a process. So we have basically identified a process that's always been there. It's just never really been leveraged. And so we call that corporate value management. And so what we're doing is we're saying once you identify it as a process and a system, you now have the ability to manage it and optimize it. And if you look at what that system, the structure it's built on, and this is the key differentiator, is it's built on the value chain structure. The default for all businesses that I've ever seen, and kind of globally, it's the org structure. And so this is the root cause for a lot of the challenges in terms of turf wars and politics and disengagement from employees, is because the org structure was never designed to manage value. It was designed to manage the relationship between employees from that hierarchical perspective. And it's a very needed one, but it is not the value management structure. So what we've done is we've taken the value chain structure, which exists in every company that ever was and ever will be, and we've just taken it from being hidden, and we make it explicit. And then when you see it, now you're in a position to optimize for that whole value creation system that your company is. And in the absence of that, organizations are optimizing for the parts. That's the org structure. So you have people optimizing for their areas, but they aren't necessarily doing an impact analysis in terms of what's going on for the whole.
So you're not replacing the org structure, right? Because obviously it's still very necessary for all the reasons you mentioned and for others, but you're overlaying a value chain structure on top of it so that all of the activities within the org are aligned with the value that's trying to be created.
Exactly right. I mean, if you subscribe to what we say is that a company is a value creation system, then that structure should be the governing structure. So the org structure is subordinate to that, not the other way around. And so talk about what that means is we look at the value chain structure as the horizontal structure and the org structure as the vertical structure. And the org structure alone, or sort of using it as the proxy for value management, implies that the higher up the value chain or the org structure you go, the better the decisions. But in the value management, we believe that the closer decisions are to where value is being created, the better the decisions. So those two things are incompatible. So one has to, kind of rule, or like I said, org structure needs to be subordinate to that. And this is really important for leaders. Again, we're only working with leaders who want to drive an empowered organization. So if you're in the old command and control world, Insight 7 is not for you. So there's a lot of leaders, thankfully, that are saying we want to drive empowered organizations, but what does that mean and how do we actually do it? So just to kind of give you an idea what this looks like is great leaders help everybody in the organization understand where they fit in that value chain. They help them understand who their customers are. I think showing people who their customers are is like one of the greatest gifts you can give, right? Because now you have this supplier-customer relationship. And as I said, if you have a customer, then you know what's the job to be done that your work is impacting. And then you also can capture what are the quality and cost targets that you're trying. So you're painting the target. That way you have something concrete as you work with the rest of your delivery team to say, here's how we're going to design and resource to be able to hit that. And if we do that and we have that clarity, we are the risk of over-engineering, which is a waste of money, or under-engineering, which is too much risk, that goes away. Because if you don't have that target defined, you're guessing. What do people do when they're guessing? They're going to do CYA, and they're typically going to over-engineer the heck out of it. And that's so much of the waste and inefficiency comes in. So we're helping, people get lean just by making that target very efficient or very clear. So, and then as a leader to empower them, now you're saying, I've done my job. I've helped you understand that context. Now I need you to lead me in terms of because you're the experts in that domain, that location in the value chain. How should it be? You tell me how it needs to be optimized to be able to hit that target. So, and again, not just the customer target, but the stakeholder value targets. And then equipping them with a system, which is what our system does, to help to see all this. And then also to kind of go, okay, value, cost, risk, time to value. Those are the options for optimization. If you can help me understand that and make a recommendation and rationalize that recommendation against value, cost, risk, time to value, I'm in a much better position you're going to go, yeah, we want option B out of option A, B, and C because, again, the business case just speaks for itself. Then I'm like, yep, happy to help and support. And, but it's not me coming in saying, you know what, I watched a podcast last night, what you guys did, and I think we're going to do this. As soon as that happens, you lose trust. And it's very deflating for those ops teams. So,
No, of course. I mean, no team likes to hear when their leader comes in with a bright, shiny new object based on a new book that they just read or podcast that just listened to, like you mentioned. They want some more, structured leadership to come from the top.
well, I would say, I'd add to that though, in this type of operation, if a leader does that, because I don't have any problem with the leader coming in and doing the bright, shiny object, but the team is empowered to challenge the leader and say, excellent. Tell me how that's going to help us get to our target better than what we're doing right now. That to me is, and that's kind of that accountability and leadership. That's where you're as a leader, you're giving permission to that team to say, challenge me. If I'm full of BS, guess what? You get to call me on that. And if that kind of becomes your culture, you have a very high performing organization, but it does take a sense of humility from the leaders. But if leaders who are laser focused and committed to driving high performance is their first goal, and that's what drives them, they don't have any problem with that.
Agreed. Those are the leaders and that are most successful along with your organizations. So speaking of a success, what project comes to mind in your past where the transformation that you drove led to the best outcome for the client? Can you share a success story, anonymously, of course?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I think I guess I'll sort of talk about them in general. I think the thing that's the most satisfying for me is I just see a lot of people showing up for work and I just see a tremendous amount of talent, and I see kind of this dormant passion. And I look at that and I'm like, your own, from a business perspective, you're going, that's only a fraction of the return on investment for those people or those systems or whatever it may be. But more from a human perspective, I would say the best example, and if there's never, Stephen, to your question, there's never not been this result that if they work with this, that you're solving the tactical problem, which is great, right? You get the assessment, you make the recommendations, you get, things back on track and what we call managing to the green. But in the process of doing that, it's a paradigm shift. It's a mindset shift that people are going, oh, it doesn't have to be that hard, and it actually can be enjoyable. So you're uplifting the way they actually do their job. Because if you're always clear on target value, you always know why you're doing what you're doing at any given point in the day. And so there's a sense of purpose there. And sometimes I can think of examples where some people have gone, oh, now that I kind of see that through line to what I'm doing in the impact on value, this isn't really where I want to be. And that's a good thing. So they were able to kind of go to their management and say, I'm looking for something else. And because they had visibility in terms of what the overall value chain looked like, they were saying, this part of the value chain looks really interesting to me. Is there any possibility that I can, make that shift into there? Or leaders may see somebody who is not delivering the way they should be. It just pops. They're able to talk to them about, hey, are we able to get this back on track or not? And then you're making a change. So it's kind of the Jim Collins, the greats, get the wrong people off the bus, right people on the bus in the right seats. And I think of Insight 7 as the bus. Nobody ever talks about the bus, but the system has to be optimized to be able to support those resources and roles and responsibilities.
So it sounds like it's a great additional accountability tool for resources to be held accountable for the objectives they need to perform on.
Exactly. And I think sometimes you hear people, sort of shy away, like accountability, like it's a bad thing and like it's going to constrain, but it actually liberates people because, if I understand what I'm being held accountable and I'm being equipped and empowered to be successful, that's where growth happens, right? That's, as they say, nothing grows in the comfort zone. So again, back to the kind of people, kind of leaders and companies that we're working with are the people that are, if you want to sort of reside in the comfort zone, that's probably not for us. We're looking for companies who are very growth minded and want to, we call them value hunters. They're constantly looking into the operation in terms of, where things are red. And that's part of what we provide in the system is anywhere within that value chain, what's red, what's yellow, what's green. We call it look for the red and manage to the green. But when you're seeing all that in the context of the overall system, you're able to look at all those areas where the performance is red or yellow, and then you can model again if those are solved, how is it going to impact overall value throughput in the entire organization? That's pretty powerful.
Agreed. So obviously there's all sorts of different types of leadership teams, and some members on these teams, perform better than others. So it sounds like this is a great tool for for a CEO to identify where there may be gaps in the leadership team and take corrective action when necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I was just talking to a leader last night, and he was sharing some of the challenges he was having around people management. And because as I was pointing out, is when target value is explicit, in this case around employee relationship capital. So this particular individual was a high performer in terms of their job, but the way they did it was kind of toxic for the rest of the environment. So while he was driving great performance, it was actually eroding value for the team. And so, but because that target value around employee relationship capital, what that actually looks like, wasn't explicit, it's open to interpretation, and it becomes a longer process to try to, resolve that. But when you actually put performance targets around behaviors, right, in terms of team norms, and you're saying this is what's expected as you're delivering your job, and those aren't being met, now you can have conversations saying, hey, this looks like it's a challenge. What are we going to do? Because it's either it's a system problem. I, as a leader, have done something where it's not, I'm providing a system that's not aligned to the strategy that I'm articulating, or it's a person problem. That person is not, they're not going to fall in line or be able to, they are not equipped to be able to deliver that, those results. And then it's just, so it becomes very fast. And oftentimes the thing I like about it most is it also, oftentimes those individuals who are having that challenge recognize the gap themselves and self-select out, and will oftentimes go, you know what, I think I'd be happier somewhere else. Let's talk about a transition.
Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that the Built to Finish podcast is brought to you by Accresis. Accresis have helped over 30 founders generate over $1 billion in wealth via strategic acquisitions or investor recapitalizations. If you're the owner of a middle market company and want to explore what a potential exit will look like for you so that you can finally realize the value of what you've been working so hard on, please do contact Accresis via the website accresis.com or hit me up on LinkedIn for more information. at Stephen Pivnik. Now, back to the show. No, that's always ideal when that happens, but there are definitely cases, which I'm sure you've seen, where a founder just feels, or founder slash CEO feels very loyal to an individual because they've been there for a long time, and they may not necessarily be experienced to be running an organization at the size that it has become, and they just hem and haw about the need to take corrective action. How have you addressed that in your projects?
Yeah, awesome question. This is the power of systems thinking versus kind of work centric, resource centric thinking. Is to use your example, if you've designed your work to value system, your company is a value creation system, and you are continually optimizing it as you move through the life cycle of growth in your company, that system needs to be re-architected and optimized to be able to support that type, what the demands on it are, right? So um, it gives you sort of objective criteria to look and say, and it's even for yourself, you go, have I hit a point where I am actually the constraint for value throughput?
When you say the actual leader, the CEO of the company will have that sort of visibility.
Absolutely, because it's all explicit. I mean, if you think about it, tools, services, and people are resources, that plug into the work plan to create the output that gets consumed, that creates value. So when you're just like if you're looking at designing and architecting, building, deploying any system, you're going to resource that system with the best available resources to be able to do the job. And so you have to look at people that way as well. It sounds impersonal, but it actually is. It's very true. And you, as I said, I think part of the power of it is whether you're the leader or your friend is somebody you went into business with, you're able to have that conversation very honestly to kind of go, how do you think you're doing? Do you think, are you hitting an edge? What do we have to, do you want to power through it? Do you want to get some additional learning to be able to grow and in the role? Or is it kind of, because oftentimes people are like, I was sort of built for, 1 to 10 million. After that, that's not really my thing. And I'm going to go, work for another company or start another company. But it becomes, you're faced when that target value is so clear and explicit, and you understand where you fit in the system and why you fit in the system, it becomes so obvious in terms of when you're crushing it and when you actually may be a limiting factor. And then those conversations just become all about, what's the ultimate goal here? And if we all agreed that we started into this as being our desires to grow value for customers in a way that's growing value for our stakeholders, and we become the limiting factor, then we probably need to, talk about again.
Yep. It sounds like a wonderful tool to have those very difficult conversations with a lot of objective data.
It is, and it's so simple, right? I mean, if you look at all the systems, everything is very work centric, and really, what we're doing is we're coming in and say, start with that end in mind, and not the output end in mind, the outcome. So keep going further, and that outcome is if you put it in the context of customers and stakeholders and make that explicit, it's absolutely transformational. Then you look at, and we say this all the time, the investment you've made in your technology, not just you're getting much better return on all your investments. So when you have that, you can not only look at just like what we were talking about with the people, but you're also looking at your technology implementations and your service implementations, and you're going, okay, are those optimized as well? It becomes very clear. So I guess I sort of look at myself as I'm lazy by nature, but I have an incredibly high bar for value. And so this was sort of the system to be able to go, I don't want it to be, because it's so hard with the status quo. And what we're bringing to life, Stephen, is it's a paradigm shift. So I look at it, our CEOs, oftentimes they've said, I didn't know I needed it until I had it. And now that I operate my business this way, I will never go back to anything else. It's kind of like the first time you used Uber, using taxis, and you went to Uber, it was like, oh,
How did I ever live without this?
that's right. And we think we're the paradigm shift for how businesses are going to operate globally, because once you do it, but it's a shift. It's not the status quo. But it is, if you're serious about driving some, real meaningful material growth and impact in your organization holistically, it's worth taking a peek at.
So it sounds like this was designed to work with companies of all sizes. Is that correct? And across verticals, or is there a specific sweet spot for organizational size from a revenue perspective? And two-part question: is there also a sweet spot for specific verticals where this works better than others?
Yeah, it it was not designed for a specific vertical, so that's the short answer for that. And it, sorry if it sounds incredibly oversimplified, but it's designed for people who are serious about driving value creation. And that doesn't care what industry, it doesn't care what size, it doesn't care, your geography. But I will tell you that, at least where we are on the stage of our company, we're still a small company. Um, you know, Dealing with, uh, SME, small medium enterprise is a great place, right? Sort of kind of like the 10 million to 1.5 billion. We'll still have leaders who are pretty involved, right, in the data in the business, as they can appreciate it, and understand it, and it's not the politics aren't as thick. As you start to go into enterprise organizations, there's just, you know, once this once we kind of break through the barrier and everybody sees the impact it's going to have, which I believe we will, I think then the enterprise will go, okay, we need to make a change, or we're not, or we're going to get, you know, we're going to become obsolete. Um, but that's not, we're not going to go try to sell enterprises. I mean, opportunistically, if it pops up, probably, but that's not really where we're targeting. So, but even, SMB, if they're early stage, funded, and they're growth minded, we work with some of those folks too. So it's probably more about, like I said, the mindset of a leadership team than it is about kind of the typical, uh, profile.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. I agree. Like companies at 1.5 billion or 2 billion and above, that's a whole different beast to try to tackle. And there's just so many other moving parts that make implementation of something like this a little bit more challenging. But there's no shortage of businesses that are in that sweet spot of 10 million to 1 billion, which can benefit tremendously from this.
Right. Yeah. And I think part of it too is, I was thinking about it, from your background, it was like, there's so many founders out there, or potential founders. People have great ideas, but the appetite of starting a business is just, it's too unappealing. It's too horrifying. And I think what we're doing is we're sort of providing that template, and not just a framework. It's a system that helps you understand what to think about when and how to rationalize what you're doing. So it gives founder leaders, the confidence to be able to know how to communicate with the board and investors and make great decisions and defend those decisions. And I love that, because I want to see more, great, ideas come into the world and manifest. And so, because it's hard. As I said, I was thinking about your background. I wanted to ask you, you've done the whole starting a company and that whole journey, and successfully exiting, which is not trivial at all. But you've also climbed these incredible peaks, and you've done the ultimate Ironman. And I just had to ask, because the thought of those things, I'm like, I can't even wrap my brain around it. So which one's harder, right? Which one, climbing the high peak, or the Ironman, or the
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know if one is harder than the other. There's just, and the reason I love both is because there's just so many similarities. And once you get good at one, there's a transferable mindset that you develop. from planning, preparation, execution, pivots, setbacks, stamina. All of those can be attributed to both, entrepreneurship as well as endurance sports. So I don't think one is harder than the other. They're both incredibly hard, and you can getting comfortable with one, I think, gets you a lot more comfortable with the other, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I love the endurance athlete because I mean, if you think about it, that's what a CEO is, and the more experienced endurance athletes find ways, to I'm guessing to how do I conserve my energy? How do I make sure that how I'm expending, my resources are going to give me the best chance of being successful in whatever endurance activity you're in. Is that a fair
No,
question?
so that's a very fair assessment. It's actually happened many times. Like, for instance, I can recall how I feel at mile 55 of a 100K ultra marathon, and how exhausted I feel, and what I need to think mentally in order to get me to the next aid station so I can recharge. So apply that to a struggle, when I would have a struggle in the business, whether it be expansion challenges that we were having, personnel challenges, a specific customer was proving incredibly more difficult than others. You kind of just apply that mindset of, hey, remember that race where you thought you were done and you were about to call it quits and throw in the towel, but you got through it somehow, and some way somehow. Just apply that to the business challenge at hand, and we got through that as well.
Yeah, I have so much respect for that. And I can imagine how valuable that would be for your clients to be able to, because when you are those lows are they happen all the time. I mean, it's the up and down, and to have someone there kind of like, hey, this is possible. Um, and I think, so what we don't do what you do. I mean, that we we love partners like yourself because you're really working with the individuals to kind of unlock the potential of the individuals. And but the challenge that we're seeing and is that if you do that, you still that team, that now sort of powerful team, is constrained by a structure that can't be that does not allow you to optimize the entire organization and leverage that power that you've just given them. And so what we're doing is we become kind of that system that as when you get them to a certain point and they're ready to kind of, now you can sort of, now let's actually build out your company to be this powerful collection of people. So everybody's sort of that leader and has that sort of drive. And then what you thought was possible before goes like this. And so we kind of look at it with partners like yourself. It gets exciting for me to, again, I could never do what you do, but you equipped with something like an Insight 7 helps take companies to a whole nother level, and just spread that power, across, and empowering, across the organization. So anyway, I just wanted to ask you about that because I really,
No,
uh,
I appreciate it. I mean, I can talk about it and the the relationship between endurance sports and entrepreneurship all day long. I love those types of questions. So go back to what you just said. I just wanted to be really clear. The Insight 7 system was designed for advisors like myself, like yourself, to utilize with their clients. It's not necessarily designed for an enterprise customer to implement by themselves and to utilize it that way. Is that correct?
well, I wouldn't say it was designed for partners. It was always designed to solve, first and foremost, companies, for the end customer, the company itself. The reality of driving a transformation, oftentimes it's best managed through partners. So if you've got partners who are coming in and trusted advisors, they are sometimes in a better position to sort of facilitate the change. And so I would say we do have some customers that are doing it on themselves, but they tend to have the capacity and the resources and the time to do it. Part of the value of of working with partners is because if you become an expert, right, and in bringing that value to bear, if I'm a customer and I'm like, wow, I've this paradigm shift has now manifested in my organization, and I'm like, I saw it in one area, now I want to expand it across the whole area. I understand the value proposition and the impact that's going to make. And so I want that value as fast as possible. So if I were to do it myself, I have to hire people, train them, and then, it takes time to be able to get time to value. But if I have a partner who knows how to do that and basically says, hey, we did this for this project, we can just turn it up and expand it. I'm looking at that. And if it's cost effective, which it is, meaning how the partner's charging for like a managed service, then I'm like, I can go as fast as I want because the partner has that capability. They're ready to roll. They've got the resources and the capacity and the know-how to do it.
Okay. Understood. Totally understood. And that makes a lot of sense. So no software conversation is complete without mentioning AI. How are you integrating AI into the solution currently?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. I want to answer that from kind of two perspectives. Obviously, AI is key into our platform, and we're optimizing our platform. We should say our platform integrates not only the operational but the financial. So you're able to import your P&L from your financial systems and then allocate that to the work breakdown structure that reflects your value chain, which is it's like cost accounting. But now we are able to see cost of value, and that's really important because if you can't make price performance decisions if you don't have both sides of that equation available at your fingertips, which our system does. So from an AI perspective, making that easier for users instead of having to be sort of like the expert on how to use the app, it's more of I'm clear on what I want, and then I'm leveraging AI to get me what I want to see in the app as fast as possible. But the really key thing for us is, again, from a leadership perspective, AI is on the B2B world. Well, let me say it's being leveraged typically kind of individually. Like people are going in and doing the prompts, or doing some agentic AI, but it's tactical. But if you think about trying to leverage it in organizations, context is everything. So if I have multiple people that are in the same role, looking to solve the same sort of problem, and they are going to go into the prompt and they're going to bring their own perspective to that prompt, the LLM may actually kick back information and recommendations that they may both act on that are in conflict of each other because there is no shared understanding. They're bringing their own perception. So what Insight 7 does, the system is providing shared understanding of work to value across the entire organization. So we become that contextual layer. We call it the ground truth. So in between the prompts and what the LLM is going to return. So whatever your system is, this is the way you kind of make sure that it's really no different whether it's a human being or it's an agentic AI. If you and I are aligned on what the target value looks like, but we're not really talking about how we're going to do it, you may decide to go right and I might decide to go left because we don't have shared understanding in terms of our delivery plan. Well, it's really no different for AI. If it doesn't have context about what's actually going on from a work to value perspective, execution to strategy alignment perspective in your organization, it has no choice but to draw upon best practices and all the information that's out there on the internet and benchmarks, which, are good benchmarks, but that may not be exactly what your organization wants. And the way you ask the question versus the way I prompted are going to drive different results. So one of the things that, in the absence of that contextual layer between the prompts and the LLM returns, is you're potentially amplifying and accelerating dysfunction and inefficiency. And so Insight 7 becomes that solution that says we're going to put that information in there so that there's alignment between all the AI agents as well as the people. And that's what drives, alignment is back to like what we said at the beginning. It's all about alignment, but you better have your AI aligned to that ground truth too, or you actually, as I said, accelerate dysfunction.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. So last question, why Insight 7? Was Insight 6 taken? Or
Yeah, great question. I think the insights part hopefully is obvious.
that makes sense.
The 7, I'm a man of faith, and so it's a divine number, and I credit a lot of just being where I am right now through that grace. So I
love it.
It's give credit where credit is due.
No, that's a beautiful thing. That's a great answer. Thank you for sharing that. So thank you very much for being a guest on today's show. You shared a lot of great information. You obviously have a wealth of experience in helping get teams get aligned in order to create value. And it sounds like the solution is going to help many advisors like myself help their clients build the value that they're looking for. So thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
You bet. And if you don't mind, I'd like to let people know how to get a hold of you. So
that's going to be my very last question. What is the best way for people to learn more information and how to get hold of you?
Yeah, come visit me on LinkedIn. It's Mike Hogan, and Insights 7. By the way, it's INSIGHTS plural 7 because there is an Insight 7 out there, unfortunately for us. But and I would just say DM me and just put value in there. If you put value in there and you've watched this and you want to get our playbook for execution to strategy alignment, happy to send that to you and connect and set up a time to talk. If it's something you want to learn more about and see how it might impact your organization, I certainly welcome that.
Great. Thank you, Mike. We'll put that information in the show notes. And thank you again for being on the show. For all the listeners and watchers, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of the Built to Finish podcast. If you found this episode interesting and meaningful, please do like and subscribe. It does help the show a lot. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stephenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Accresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.